Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Jackie, I'm an aspiring writer, and I actually have the next week off work, which is really exciting. So today is the 20th of February, and because of COVID, obviously can't travel anywhere, so I thought why not treat this week as a bit of an experiment and see what it would be like to live as a full-time writer. So this week I'm going to try being a full-time writer for the week. Caveat, when I say full-time writer, I don't mean I'm going to try and do 40 hours of writing for the week, mainly because I do just have a week off. I will be going back to work on the 1st of March, so I could try and push for something like that, but I don't think it's wise because there's no recovery time. It's more just seeing how I naturally want to structure my day and how much writing I can get done when the restriction around having to spend a certain amount of time at work each week is gone. So, what am I working on this week? There are two things I'd like to look at. The first one is my fantasy hot mess. This is the project I've been working on since Christmas week, so 2 months now. I'm actually no further along than I was 2 months ago, which is really depressing. But I think one of the things you'll see as this week progresses is that this book has involved a lot of going back and doing the same thing over and over. So one of the first scenes I want to work on this week is actually going to be the 4th time I've done this scene in this draft. So it's a bit of a slow process. However, I'm okay with that. I don't have a firm deadline. I just want this to be the best book it can be. Other than that, I do have a few other things on this week, especially this weekend, so I think that's going to help give a more realistic expectation of what full-time writing life will be like, because I imagine when you are a full-time writer, you do still have other things going on in your life. It's not like you just put your life on hold so you can lock yourself away in a cabin and write, or at least if you do, that's probably not your average week. So today, for instance, now I actually need to go to a French bakery. So Drew discovered that there's this French baker who works 1.5 kilometers from here. So I need to go out now and pick up some fresh French bread, which is going to be amazing. And then this afternoon, I'm meeting up with some former colleagues to go axe throwing and do karaoke. So probably not getting any writing done today, but just in case, I thought I'd start the video now. It is now 11:30 on Monday morning and I've just done 2 hours of work on my book. So I did about 10 minutes of outlining type of work just because I had some different ideas that I hadn't incorporated into the outline yet. And what was interesting was that I've mostly just outlined up to the midpoint of the book. Is it the midpoint? Yeah, to the midpoint, and between the turning point and midpoint, so the second 25%, is mostly there, but it still needs some work. I feel like I've got Perry's plot outlined, but I need to find some more stuff for Aubrey to do in that little chunk. So I've outlined up to the midpoint of the book, and I started wanting to do the midpoint and wasn't really getting anywhere, and I thought, maybe that's not such a problem. I'm nowhere near up to this point in the writing yet, so why not just focus on writing what I'm up to, and when I'm a bit closer I can do that bit, because I know that a lot of what I did in the draft in 2019 is going to be reusable for that point. So I think once I've got my new first half of the book, then I'll be in a better position to recreate the second half and decide what I want to keep and what I want to cut from the previous version, as well as what needs to be added. So I did my 10 minutes of outlining, then I did the next hour and 50 minutes was sort of writing work. It was actually rewriting a scene that I worked on the last time I did a writing session and redoing it from someone else's point of view. And I'm finding it really interesting to work on a book where I already have so much information and so much that I know I want to achieve. And admittedly, my experience is limited. In recent history, I've only really completed 2 projects. This is one of them and Powerless was the other one. And I think in general, the Powerless process was the better one. It was a lot more efficient, at least, because I had my outline, I did my NaNoWriMo draft, and then when I started revising it, I was really just trying to build on what was already there. So in this book, there's so much thought that's gone into it over the past 15 years that trying to figure out how to fit it all in is a struggle, but there's also an opportunity there, because in Powerless, when I was sort of writing the first draft, it was really just, okay, so how do I get from here to here to here to here? It's really just, I have my plot points and it's transitioning from one to the next. Whereas in this one, yes, there's also that element of I need to transition from one thing that happens to the next thing that happens, but because there's so much more information, I have the ability to ask myself, well, what's the most powerful way of doing this? So the example of the scene I'm currently working on, I'm up to my third version of this scene, in fact, fourth version of this scene. And when I talk about versions in this video, I'm only talking about this draft of the book, so it's not including the previous two drafts. So this scene, I'm now up to version 4. And the reason is because when I first put it in, I'm like, I really want to have a chapter that shows a bit of Perry and Madeira's relationship before we get into the plot, and things are moving too quickly for us to establish that. So they were going to go out on the town because it's mentioned later that this is something they used to do. So they go out on the town and Madeira was gambling, and I thought they could get into a bit of a scuffle before they leave, and the bar sees Perry's hair colour. For context, Perry has unusual colouring and people get a bit strange about it. I can't really say any more without giving context that even the characters don't know at this point, but no one else looks like her, and people get a bit weird when they see her, from just ignoring her to downright rude to abusive type of thing. So I thought this is a good chance to see what the reaction to her is like out in the real world, because in the university where she lives, everyone's sort of used to her, so we don't, like, you sort of hear her mentioning that she looks strange, but we don't see what impact that has. So that was the first iteration. They went out, they got into a scuffle, they ended up stopping by at a friend's house so we could meet him as well, and then they decided they were going to steal the MacGuffin at the end of the scene. So this was a transitional one, but there was some purpose. So that was version 1. Version 2, I thought, yes, it's nice that we've included a bit about Perry's colouring, but the other thing that's big in this book is that people don't like mages. In fact, there was a war that ended 20 years ago where they tried to kill them out. And in the world today, basically, they're trained to be hidden, like to learn how to hide their abilities. And this is something that was sort of told in earlier versions, but not really shown. And I thought, okay, what if we turn this into, yes, Perry's hair is like the catalyst for the scuffle, but then they discover they're mages and we can see what some of the real anger is. So I ended up having these guys, so we cut the going to the friend's house. These guys ended up following them out of the pub and tried to attack them. And then Madeira uses her powers to stop them, which you're not supposed to do at all. But the whole thing about Madeira's character is that she's like just so angry. Like, she knows she has all of this strength. She knows she's meant for so much more. She's sick of being an outcast and a target. And like back home, she's sort of been promised to a 60-year-old coffee magnate, which she isn't happy about. So her arc in this book is really about taking her power back. So first rewrite was visiting the friend. Second rewrite was incorporating that. And I did that in I actually did 2 versions of the second version. So there were a couple of different ways that the Madeira using her powers could go. One was they were sort of both attacked up against a wall, and then another one was like she got away but Perry didn't, and she came back to save Perry. And that was the one I settled on when I finished my last writing session on this book, because I thought it's good for their relationship too, to show that Madeira's like going to be there for Perry. She's not just going to save herself. But then once I finished the last version, I was working in the office that day and I was on the bus home, and I thought, this should be from Madeira's point of view, because it's about Madeira's character and her arc. It's not about Perry's, like Perry's just a witness. So then today, what I've been working on is redoing the entire chapter from Madeira's point of view. So I did 3,603 words, but they're not all new. It's sort of, the scene was already there. I was just redoing it from Madeira's point of view. But in any case, I think it was really good progress so far. And I think, given that it's been like a week since I last worked on the book, it was a really good way to get back into it, like being able to work on something that was already there rather than start something from scratch. So now it has been 2 hours since I started writing. I am a bit worn out, so I'm going to go to the gym for a lunch break and then come back here and maybe I'll try writing something that's new this afternoon. I'm now back from the gym and it's actually been 3 hours, so one of the things that's really nice about not having work is you can take all the time you want. So that was part of it. The other thing is that the free weights area has been closed for the last 2 months because they've been like refurbishing it, and today was open, so I got to do like actual squats and things again. So I had a long workout and then also, sauna and shower and everything. Then came back and had some lunch, and 3 hours of my day is gone. So, yeah, not that there's anything bad about that. It's interesting to see how time goes and where it goes. But the good news is I don't need to be back at work, so there's no rush. So I don't actually know what I'm going to work on next. I think maybe I should go through like the next scene again. So basically, if you've followed this Fantasy Hot Mess saga, you might know that it is a book with multiple point of views, and one of the things I decided I was going to do was write through each of the main characters' perspectives up to the turning point, so the 25% mark. And I've been focusing on Perry, who's like the main character, and the chapters in her story were she's preparing for the exhibition and there's a train thing. She speaks to the governor/master, whose title I need to confirm, about presenting at the opening gala, and he says no and he wants to present the MacGuffin instead. Then she and Madeira go out, get into trouble, decide to steal the MacGuffin. That's now from Madeira's point of view, but because it's part of the same story, I'm just going to include it. They go and steal the MacGuffin. Things start going wrong. There's an aftermath chapter that I looked at a few weeks ago, which I think I need to revisit because I don't know if it works. And then I'm not sure if this is immediately next or if we need a couple of days, but she is working at the exhibition and preparing everything, and someone steals it from her. And that's the turning point moment. So I think like that's almost done actually in some form. So I need to go through like the next two chapters, the stealing and the aftermath. They've already been drafted. I just need to go through and make sure they still work. And then there's just this one little linking chapter, unless I squeeze it into the aftermath one. I'm not sure yet, but in any case, we're almost up to that turning point, at which point I will go back and look at Aubrey's chapters. I'm a little worried about Aubrey because I've spent this time fleshing out Perry's stuff. She has more story now happening before that turning point. Aubrey, on the other hand, his story was originally escape from the castle, get caught in his escape and given a mission and arrive in Daramon, which is the city where the book is set. And then after arriving in Daramon, he bumped into Perry and caused the MacGuffin to get stolen, basically. So he had 4 chapters leading up to this. And I've been trying to think about how to expand it. And it's a bit hard because the good thing about Perry is, or the good thing about most characters, is you can sort of show a day in their life so you can see how things change. His day in the life isn't very interesting because he's been locked in a tower for 10 years. So I figure I can add one scene with him locked in the tower, with him plotting before he escapes. But other than that, I'm not sure. So that's not a today problem anyway. I'm not going to get through that much, I don't think. So it's a problem for later this week, but I do need to figure it out. I think it would be nice if he had something else he was working on once he got to Daramon before he bumps into Perry. And then other than that, so if you saw my planning document earlier, you might have noticed there are 3 columns. Basically, one column is Perry, one column is Aubrey, and the next one is sort of the cast of villains. So that's Jaredin and Ince, and they're like sidekicks. Them, I'm not too fussed about having like a complete narrative. Like I don't think I need to go through and create the same amount of content for them. I think just if we get like the key turning points for them, so as each of the pieces of the plan falls in place, that'll work. I've been thinking of this similarly to A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. So that is the second book in the Shades of Magic series, and Kel and Lila are the 2 main characters. They each have fairly complete plots. And then you've got Holland, who's like the sort of antagonist. Not really. He's like the dark force lurking in the background, but not really causing problems until towards the end of the book. But we do check in with him a couple of times, and I went through and estimated, like, in this book, which is maybe 100 to 120,000 words, he has 10,000 words. So you do just check in with him at those key points. So having seen it being done in a way that works, I think the way I'm going to approach this will work. So thank you again, V.E. Schwab, for giving me something I can copy. So I think that's enough babbling. I should really get to work now. Now, one of the problems of unpicking scenes and doing them again and again is that means you need to unravel what comes after them as well. So I mentioned the first version of this scene had them going to their friend's house, and now I've moved on to the next one, which starts with their friend, and they're arguing about whether they should actually go through with stealing the MacGuffin or not. And I can cut that out, but the thing is I really like the argument. Like, it's just funny and it's a really good way to sort of say what all of the obstacles are. And it wouldn't make sense for it to happen between Medea and Perry since they're sort of on the same side. So now I'm like, well, do we make them stop by this other friend's house on the way to stealing the MacGuffin? Which doesn't really make sense because they'd see him, have an argument with him, and then he wouldn't tag along with them anyway. So yeah, I'm not sure what to do because I really like this bit and I don't want to lose it, and it wouldn't actually work anywhere else in the book. Like, it's unique to this one scenario. So yeah, this session is mostly just staring at the screen thinking. So it's been an hour and I'm not getting anywhere. I looked at the beginning of that scene and I put in a flashback that I'd cut out, and I need to add a little bit of linking to get the pre-heist stuff into the heist stuff, because there's now no planning and no arguments with the character who's no longer involved. And yeah, I'm just not getting anywhere. Like, I've read through everything and sort of can't think of what to do other than write, need to add something here. So I don't know if it's just because this is a difficult section or if it's because I did like quite a bit this morning, but I think I'm going to call it a day, which feels really weird because I haven't actually spent that much of this day writing or working on my writing, but yeah, maybe my tolerance will build up as the week goes on. We'll have to see. It is Tuesday morning and I just got back from the gym and I fell over on the way back because on the weekend we actually had some warm weather, warm meaning like +1, and all the snow started melting. And if you're from a place where it snows, you already know that this happens, but for Australians who are watching who don't know about this, when snow melts, it needs to be warm for like a consistent period for it to melt and go away, but if it's not, it melts and then refreezes as this really lumpy ice. So on the way to the gym, there are paths which don't really get shoveled, so now they're covered with like 3 inches deep of this lumpy ice that is refrozen. So I slipped over and fell for the first time in 2 years, because I haven't fell since my first winter here, and someone saw, so it was very embarrassing. And now my shoulder's a bit sore, even though it's not the side I fell on, so not sure what's happening there. But anyway, I live to tell the tale, clearly, and today I need to get back to writing. So my goals for today are, 1, to get through the stealing the MacGuffin scene. Because I've already been through that a couple of times in this draft, I don't think I'm going to rewrite it. I think I might just link the 2-part scenes I have by saying, 30 minutes later they were at the foot of Whitehall with all of the equipment they'd gathered. I also thought that I could potentially include like the funny conversation I wrote in the aftermath, so maybe the next morning they bump into this friend and they talk about it as something they have done, not something they're going to do, because his sense of shock and consternation will still be the same whether they've done it or are thinking about doing it. So we've got the aftermath scene, which is when they get back to the dorms and everyone's awake, then maybe breakfast the next morning. And now I'm thinking maybe I don't even need the scene when they get to the dorms. Maybe we just jump to breakfast the next morning and sort of say in a sentence how, they'd gotten back and everyone was awake, which could work as well. I don't know, I don't want to cut stuff I've done though. This is the problem when you write stuff. You have things that you've written and you want them to go in the book. You don't want to write it and then have to throw it out entirely. So maybe this is another section I'll highlight in yellow. But basically I want to get to the point. I want to get Perry to the point where she's ready for the orb to be stolen, and then I'll go back and start Aubrey. So that's really just figuring out the aftermath, and I think we can probably... I don't know whether it's going to be too fast, but this is great viewing material. So I'm stuck because when I write, things tend to happen very quickly. I'm not very good at having time passing because everything sort of happens one after the other. So a story which maybe I originally thought would take place over 3 months ends up taking place over 4 days. So this is sort of what's happening here. It's like, okay, this has happened. Does it get stolen the next day? Because there's nothing else that really needs to happen between her stealing it and getting stolen. Or do I need to add a break of a few days in there because the antagonists need some time to get their shit together. Now that they realize it's stolen, they need to assemble the forces in order to steal it from her. I don't know if this is a downside or an advantage of trying to do the entire story from one character's point of view up to the turning point, because having multiple point of views means when there's not much happening here, I can skip over to the other point of view. But the idea is that each character should have their own complete story happening. So if there's like not much happening, you know, obviously Perry is doing something in her life while Jaredon's recruiting Ints and telling him to start following her. So yeah, I'm not really sure how that works. I'm just going to try today and see what happens, and yeah, get up to the point where she bumps into Aubrey and then go back and start working on Aubrey's story. So I was working on my book for about 3 hours today, and 2 hours of that was productive time. I actually took a break in the middle because I got just a bit stuck and worn out and really needed a break. So I spent the valuable time watching YouTube because I'm on holiday and I can. Good news is I've gotten everything done, so I'm now at the point where Perry in the next chapter will bump into Aubrey and we'll lose the MacGuffin and the plot will start. So that's where I wanted to get to. I'm not 100% happy with what I did because this last chapter is really just a mix. Like, it's a mismatch of things as opposed to something where there's a clear event happening. So we have the aftermath of stealing the MacGuffin where they get back to the dorm and realize that it's woken everyone up and they're not sure why. We have the next morning where they look at Whitehall and it looks like the orb is still there and all the damage is undone and they don't know why. And then they go to breakfast, and I brought in the friend who they were originally meeting the night before and basically included all of the conversations from the previous night, but, you know, now referring to the past, which I quite like. But the thing is, because it's just this chapter sort of reacting to what happened the night before and what went wrong, there's nothing really happening. And I have a feeling this is going to be one of those ones where once I've got the full draft and go back through it, it's not going to work. But I'm not sure what else to do in this spot for now, so I sort of think it's better to just like leave it and know that this might be one of the, you know, 3 or 4 chapters that I'll have when I get to the end of the book that'll need to be redone anyway, because that's what happened with Powerless. Like, there are sort of the first scene needs to be redone, and then there are sort of 2 chunks in the book that don't work as well as they could. I think one's 1 chapter and one's sort of 2 chapters in a row. So yeah, now I just feel a bit tired. And I think one of the things I'm realizing is even when I have all of this time to write, I do only have a certain amount of capacity for writing. So maybe being a full-time writer isn't realistic. I don't know. Or maybe it's just because, you know, I'm tired from work and this week was supposed to be a sort of slow recovery week. And if I was legitimately writing full-time, then I would have more capacity for creativity each day. So something interesting to think about. The biggest thing that's annoying me about the scene, though, is I'm not sure where to end it because it is just this sort of mismatch of stuff that happens in between stealing the MacGuffin and what happens next. So usually, like, I like to end chapters on a cliffhanger or a revelation or at least a good last line, and this one, sort of the conversation's just meandering, and I feel like I need something to set up that Trevor's going to be part of the welcoming committee, he'll meet Aubrey and we'll take Aubrey to the exhibition. So we need something on like, will I see you at the exhibition? But that's such a boring way to end a scene, so I'm really not sure what to do with the end of the scene. At least it's done. I have, I think, 20,300 words or so in this document, which is just Perry's story. There's about 2,700 which I wrote earlier and I'm going to move later in the book, so that means, what, like 18,000 is actually her first part of the book, which I think is a pretty good introduction for just one character. So tomorrow I can start working on Aubrey, which is going to be a nice change because it's been like almost 2 months since I've done anything with Aubrey because I've been working on Perry since I did my attempt to write a book in a week. So that should be fun. So I've been thinking about Aubrey's story and I'm not getting very far, so I'm heading to the gym for a workout. But basically, after yesterday's aftermath scene, I had the realization that scenes need, like, purposes. There needs to be a central action or goal that the character's going for. And what I realized is that this aftermath scene, it has objectives from my point of view as the author. So those objectives include that I want to show the aftermath of stealing the MacGuffin and what happened. I want to say that all of the mages woke up, so we know that there's some connection between it and the mages, even though we don't know what it is. And I want to show, like, the next morning, basically it looks like nothing happens, so that explains why there's no public outcry or panic. So I have all of these objectives, but I don't actually have anything that's meant to happen in this scene. So that then creates a situation where you've got a bunch of like disconnected bits of dialogue and description and so on, but nothing's actually happening, and it makes it really hard to know when to end the chapter as well, because you don't just get to the end of the action. But anyway, I put it aside because I hadn't been getting anywhere, and I decided to look at Aubrey's story, and what I wanted to do was add like a chapter or two to the beginning of his story, like what I did with Perry's, so we get more of a sense of his life. So I have objectives. I want to show more of his life before he escapes from the castle and goes to Daramon. I want to show how he's been trying to like make a role for himself at the king's side, and I want to show his like magical ability, which is reading minds. So I want to show, you know, how he's able to listen in on what people are thinking and how he uses that to manipulate them to get what he wants. So I have these objectives. I don't have anything that needs to happen though. Yeah, what I was thinking was that we'd have a chapter or two where he's locked in the tower and he's basically making his final bid for like a role at his father's side. And the role I always thought would be good for him is as a spy, because he can read people's minds. So what I want to establish is that he's had this like habit over the years of, well, not habit, but he's been trying over the years to feed information to his father that he might not know, as a way of proving his worth. And what needs to happen in this scene is it's his final bid for this role. So he needs to find one final bit of information that his father doesn't know, that he thinks will be more desirable than anything he's shared in the past. And hopefully that'll like give him a legitimate role. And if it doesn't, then he's decided now's the time and he's going to go. So I sort of have a vague idea of what I want to have happen, but there's nothing much beyond that. So like, again, it's all objectives, but no clear goal or action that's happening in the scene. So I don't really know what to write. And I think the missing piece is whatever is the piece of information he finds out. But this raises more problems, because obviously his father's the king, he has his own spies. So how would Aubrey come across a piece of information that the king already isn't aware of? And then two, what is it that's big enough to make Aubrey think this is the thing that'll get him free? And I thought what would work is if I could find something about Daramon. So maybe something that leads the king to think, I don't know, they're going to declare war or who knows what. And that would work really well, and it would be nice to tie it into the main plot. The problem is, the antagonists aren't doing anything at this time. Like, they haven't started their plan, so it can't be about them. And I'm not sure what else it could be. So, yeah, I wasn't getting anywhere, so I'm going to have a workout, and hopefully I'll make more progress when I get back. I'm back from the gym. I still don't know how to address the scene that I was planning to write, so I'm going to go out to a cafe, because I haven't actually written from a cafe and I don't even know how long, and I think just being surrounded by people will sort of create a little bit of pressure where I have to actually work rather than just waste time. So I'm obviously back from the cafe. My goal was to work on the first chapters for Aubrey's story, so here's my other main point of view character. And as I think I said earlier, the first couple of chapters I had from the last draft I was going to keep, but I wanted to add like a new 1 or 2 chapters beforehand so we see a little bit more of his life. And after maybe half an hour of faffing around and looking on Google, I decided, no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to go with the existing chapters. And the main reason for that is that I still can't think of something for him to be doing, and I know that including a chapter for the sake of having a chapter usually isn't the best approach. So because it's the beginning of the book, I can tack on things that happen earlier. So if I do come up with an idea later, it might be really interesting for him to have another chapter or two at the beginning where he uncovers some sort of conspiracy that prompts his escape. But until I think of something, I don't think there's any point in adding that. So I went through the original first 3 chapters, which haven't really changed much since the 2019 draft. And today when I went through them, I didn't change very much again. I think chapters 1 and 2 work pretty well. So chapter 1 is his escape from the castle. Chapter 2 is when he gets caught. And then chapter 3 was his arrival in Daramon and sort of like seeing the new city and getting a little tour of Whitehall. And It's a little bit like the aftermath chapter that Perry has after they steal the orb, where stuff needs to happen. We need something to transition from the previous scene to the next day. And there are things that it accomplishes, but there isn't one key action or goal or objective that the chapter is structured around, and it's a bit weaker because of that. And this is the same case with Aubrey's third chapter, and I'm not sure how to solve it. And I'm not going to solve it today because I am exhausted, and I have a feeling it's because I had this giant brownie at the cafe and it's just too much sugar for my body to handle anymore. So yeah, warning to everyone who's under 30, this happens when you get older, or at least it's happening to me when I get older. I haven't changed much about that third chapter at the moment, and I'm sort of just leaving it there as a placeholder like the aftermath one, which I might go back to. But what this means is I only need to do one more chapter in order to have everything set up to get into my turning point sequence of events, which is about 7,900 words, I think. I checked the old document yesterday, and that I'm basically just going to copy and paste. So that's going to be really exciting. That'll be a really big word count day. I wouldn't have earned those words, but yeah, one of the things that's a bit weird in my writing tracker is how I track words because there are different activities, but it'll be a big word day. So from here, I am really exhausted, so I wanted to get the other chapter done tonight. It's going to be the first chapter from Jaredon's point of view. He's the antagonist, and it's going to be after they've stolen the orb, and there's sort of been like a mini earthquake, and Whitehall has broken into two, and everyone's panicking, and they don't know where it is. And I do have a version of that chapter from when I was working on this book over Christmas. However, I've got a lot more stuff that I want to add to it, mainly him fighting with the other masters at the school, because there's bad blood there and it would be nice to introduce it. I think this will also need a little bit more work because in the Christmas version of this book, I originally introduced him a bit earlier and had an initial chapter with him, and I don't think I'm going to include that, or I'll include the scene because I like the scene, but it doesn't need to be at the beginning, it can be a bit later. So this will be our first time meeting him as well, so this chapter is going to have to do a lot more legwork than it had to last time. So I'll see if I revive a little this evening, because it would be really nice to get that done tonight, and then tomorrow I can just jump into copying and pasting the 7,900 words into the document. Hello, it is Thursday, and I just did the first chapter of Jaredon's story. To be honest, I'm seriously considering keeping his previous first chapter in the book, which sort of happened before this. The reason I'm for it is because I really like the scene. I think it's a good way to start. It has some of his rhetoric in there, which I like. The reason I'm not thinking about putting it in there is because I'm worried about having too much time away from Perry when we're supposed to be building her story and the relationship with her. But anyway, I've done his chapter, which is the aftermath after the orb is stolen, and he reacts and decides that, okay, he's going to find it now. Now it's vulnerable, he has his chance. And that means I've done everyone's scenes up to the turning point, so now I'm going to put them all into a single document. So what I've got is an empty document on one side of the screen, and then in the other side of the screen I have my draft documents. So I have a separate document for Perry, a separate one for Aubrey, and a separate one for Jaredon. So I've put my documents together, and I now have 27,258 words, which is about what I was expecting based on what the draft I did over Christmas, or how long that was. Actually, no, that's longer. Because I think, hang on, where's my... I have too many tabs open. Let me check that draft. Okay, interesting. So that was about... I'm saying about because there was a bit that I had in for the words that I never moved across. So I think it was about 29,600 all up. And that actually includes the whole next section that I'm going to put back into here, which is 7,900 words. So I've actually added quite a bit, which I didn't realise. And that's even including this scene of Jaredon's that I didn't copy across because I'm sort of 50-50 about whether to put it in. And I think that's about 3,000 words as well. Come on, scroll, scroll, scroll. Yeah, so 2,941. So if I include that in here, that means I've got 30,000 words is this first 20% of my book. This is going to be a long book. So that feels pretty substantial, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. I do feel like the work I've done on it has made it stronger, which is always promising. I am a little bit worried about the balance between the different points of view, especially if I put this extra chapter from Jaredin in there, because the way it's structured at the moment is we have 3 chapters, well, 2 chapters as Perry, 1 as Madeira, but that's sort of the Perry storyline because they're together, so I'm including that as sort of protagonist. Then we have 2 chapters for Aubrey where we introduce him. We go back to Perry where she steals the orb. We get our first chapter from Jaredin, which is his aftermath chapter, and then the last 2 chapters, one of them's the Perry aftermath chapter, which I'm not really sure about because there's not one clear event that's supposed to happen here, so it does feel like a bit of a ramble. And then we've got Aubrey's arriving in Daramon, getting his tour chapter, which doesn't have a clear event. So yeah, the last 2 chapters need a bit of work, but otherwise, like, that's 27 to 30,000 words, depending on what I do with that chapter, that I think is working pretty well. I don't know why I'm so happy. Like, I am feeling really happy that I finally got here, but part of me in my head is going, you haven't actually gotten any further than where you were in the week of Christmas when you tried to write this book in a week. So from here, I actually have to go out because I've got a massage scheduled, which is going to be wonderful and going to make it feel like I wasn't working on the book for this whole week. And then this afternoon, I think I'll move those 7,900 words with the turning point incident across and see how that works. And then maybe tomorrow I'll actually, like, shock horror, I'll write something new this year rather than just going back over and over the first 20-25% of the same book again and again. So it's massage time. Happy Friday. So at the library yesterday, I went through the 7,900 words from the last version of the book, which was the whole turning point incident, which I was fairly sure I wanted to keep, and I have mixed feelings about where the book is now, because one, it's 38,000 words. I'm not sure how that happened. I mean, obviously, I know how that happened. I wrote a whole lot of stuff and then put it into the same document and the words added up, but because I've been so focused on these smaller parts, like Perry's section has been the longest, and that's maybe 18,000 words, but all of the others have been sort of a few thousand words here and there. So putting it all together, it was like, oh, I've actually done quite a bit of work on this. So there's sort of this, like, almost triumph that, oh, I've actually made some progress in this book. This is really exciting. There's also a bit of a sense of dread because if I plot using story engineering structure, which is sort of my default plotting structure, it divides books into percentages, and your turning point, or first plot point as Larry Brooks calls it, is supposed to happen around the 20 to 25% mark of the book. So I estimated it started around 20%, and probably because it's over multiple chapters, and I sort of have these like domino scenes or things that happen. So you have this one thing and it turns into something else. So it's like maybe 10% of the book. So that's 20 to 30% of the book. So what that means is I'm at 38,000 words, and in theory I should be around the 30% point of the book, which means my final book is going to be like 125,000 words, which is longer than I was expecting, and that's a little daunting. Future Jackie here. So if you're still watching, you've probably noticed this is a very long video and the week isn't over yet. So I've decided to split this into 2 parts, and I'll be publishing the second part next week. So if you've been enjoying things so far, please like and subscribe, and please tune in again next week when you will see me have a mini breakdown when I realise that I might need to get rid of one of my main characters in order to make the story work. It's not fun. Other than that, if you are a full-time writer, I would love it if you told me how you structure your week in the comments below. Or if you're an aspiring full-time writer, let me know what you think your ideal week would look like. Other than that, again, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, do everything that will keep the gods of YouTube happy, and I will see you next week. Bye.